Hello, happy Friday. Welcome to the E-Spot with Camille. I'm your host, Camille Cower, and I cannot wait for you to meet my guest today. He is the attorney who doesn't just practice law with entertainment. He also works with athletes and real estate. He pretty much does it all. So I can't wait to get some great information from Mr. JJ Poole himself. And thank you so much for joining me today. I am so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So how's everything going? What are you up to today?
Well, today's been a busy day because, a lot of things are taking place in the music world. And so I'm trying to button up a few agreements for new artists who are looking to get into record label deals. Deals have changed because of the virus. Things are going to change because things are switching over a little bit. So the contracts and agreements are kind of changing. So
well, let me start with the beginning because now I'm very curious about what you were going to say, but let's find out how you got into this first before I jump ahead of myself because I want to hear more about that. So how did you get into entertainment law? Did you start with real estate first, business first, or jump right into entertainment?
Well, I interned while I was in law school with an entertainment attorney who had written a book about entertainment. And so he had several clients that were, I want to say mid-level clients, one or two superstars. So I was kind of thrown in the fire during that internship, and I had to learn a lot on the fly. And so it was something that was exciting, and there were some areas in there that I didn't know connected to my previous life. And so there were some passions that also connected there. So having the having that relationship.
I'm curious. What were the passions?
Well, the first one was helping people, right? I have a distinct connection to trying to make people put people in the best position in their lives. My motivation every day is to watch and to see people become successful. Well, not just myself, but other people.
Yeah.
So that that led me into the area. And as soon as I got out of law school, I started to go to seminars across the United States, out in Vegas, to learn from other lawyers who was doing this. And out of the blue, because I had worked in the real estate area, I had been asked by some friends who were athletes and in the entertainment field to be, to represent them in some minor things, and that kind of ballooned. So it's been a journey.
I can only imagine because I don't know exactly when you started in entertainment law, but things have changed really rapidly, I feel like, from Napster days to like now with music going right back to streaming, and just how contracts are changing and making sure your artists are protected with so many different places people can find music and promote music. And I know YouTube gives me a very hard time when I try to upload videos with music as well. So I'm just being on the law side of things. I'm curious how that works for you, even keeping up with all of that.
Yeah, well, a lot has changed here in the last 5 years. It's changed more than at any time in the music industry. Okay. You got to remember that, when maybe 10 years ago, before Instagram or Facebook or anything became super, super, uber popular around the world, contracts got done, in an office between record labels and executives and A&R people sitting at a table, and those deals included terms that had relationship to things that were not digital streaming, were not mechanical. And so royalties were set out differently. Mm-hmm. Now, in the digital age, there's so many different ways that royalties will pay an artist, and so many artists that are getting left out because they were either artists in another era or they're new artists that don't understand the new era.
Okay.
And so a lot of the changes have taken place very, very quickly.
Yeah, I'm curious, for so many artists that may be watching, maybe new or maybe already existing, what would you say would be the first thing they need to do as far as making sure they're protected? Like what documents should they do? Is it LLC, DBAs? Should they trademark their names? Like, what normally is your advice as far as what matters most to protect themselves?
Well, I think the first thing to determine when you start to decide whether or not you're going to be a creative, and that's what we call them in the industry. If you're going to decide whether or not you're going to be a creative, you want to organize your data in on your song, right? You want to get the proper registrations. You want to make sure that you have an ISRC number, which is your International Standard Recording Code, which is basically like your music fingerprint, right? That music fingerprint is going to keep track of, wherever that work may end up. And that's how the artist typically gets paid. And that might be the difference between, national stardom or hearing your beat on someone else's track, right?
Right.
So if you think about the progression of a successful artist, you're thinking first that the artist is going to organize the data on their song, right? The second thing they want to do is understand how that song is going to be distributed. Mm-hmm. So they're going to need to get with a distribution company, or they're going to need to get with one of the distribution channels that that are out in the marketplace right now, like for example, TuneCore, there's CD Baby, there's DistroKid. These are all distribution channels, but the old way of distributing would have been to sign with a distribution company that would take a portion of your profits. Even now, some artists are using Spotify to distribute some of their works. So you want to get, the first step was to organize the data on your song. The second step was to understand the distribution. The third step, I would say, would be to understand what you're going to do around your publishing. Now, really, really good artists will own the publishing part of their brand, right? So they become the publishing company. And part of what I do is I create business entities and form business entities based on how they want to organize their publishing efforts. There are also publishing. Now, when you start let me take a step back. When you start a publishing company, you also need to understand publishing administration, right? If you're not an expert at publishing, someone is going to have to be hired to find those royalties. Either you're going to sign with a performing rights organization, right? Which would be your ASCAP or BMI, or your two major performing rights organizations here. There are others like Sound Exchange that collect different types of royalties. But generally, you want to understand, what type of performing rights organizations you're going to end up with, whether it's ASCAP or BMI. And then when you decide and pick a publishing format, whether you're going to start your own, then the performing rights organization will collect royalties in association with your publishing format. So the important thing to know is that, you know, a PRO, Performing Rights Organization, BMI, ASCAP, these are not publishers, right? They just collect fees on your behalf. Now, they only collect a certain type of fee. They don't collect all of your fees, right? So you have 3 types of royalties you can collect, right? You got your performance royalties.
Okay.
You got your mechanical royalties, and then you got your micro sync royalties, right? Your performance royalty is going to be anything based on performance. So if you're performing at a bar, a restaurant, or a cafe of some type,
oh, we're big. We're performing at arenas.
Well, and those too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Your streaming services are also considered performances. For example, like Spotify and Apple Music,
Mm-hmm.
those are considered performance. And then your live performance, like you were mentioning, your tours, your big, your arena, and then your interactive video, for example, like Pandora. Okay. So you gotta have, you know, the relationship with ASCAP and BMI, but then your mechanical royalties that come along, you know, typically are going to be collected through Harry Fox. You can't really have a relationship with Harry Fox unless you're already in a relationship with ASCAP or BMI, or unless you have a specific link to those organizations through someone like Song Trust or one of the others. Okay. What I do for artists is kind of help them corral all this together and manage that effectively. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, as we said, and I think I've seen somebody put this up here, organize data, understand the determine distribution process. Then you want to think about your publishing. Your last is going to be your brand and your marketing. Now, so a lawyer comes in here where you are going to get a record deal, right? If you get a record deal with one of the, as an indie, right, an independent artist, you're going to have a whole different level of negotiation. But before you can even think about getting the record deal, you got to do your own branding and marketing most of the time, right? Yeah. Unless you just come in out of the gate and you're extraordinary. That's a very, very difficult thing to do. Most of the people in the industry don't end up there. They end up at the new artist level and the mid level. And then, you know, they don't make it into superstardom right away. It takes several years, and if they ever do make it. So that's where we start. You asked me about starting. Right. And so that's where, you know, the best way to get started.
Okay. I see a lot of people who are now very concerned, especially with musicians, because they can't make those live performances anymore. And there's new contracts, I guess, being made as far as with streaming opportunities or going live even on like Instagram or here on Facebook or whatever. Do you have any advice for people on how to protect themselves on that way too? Because it's so easy for someone to pirate those or to screen record them and sell them to their friends or whatever on that end too. Like, do you have any advice for that as well?
Well, I think the most practical advice is to get your works copyrighted, right? Like under the United States federal law, you know, once you create a work, it's a copyright, okay? But there are certain benefits to registering the copyright, and until the copyright has been registered, and until you have a record of your right, then there are certain protections you don't get, right? For example, the statutory protection for having the copyright is an award anywhere from $750 to $30,000 for each infringement. Now, there could be 10 infringements in one scenario, but if you don't have that registration, you still have the copyright. You just don't have the statutory rights that come with the copyright. You have to go through a lot of litigation to protect those rights. In those instances, you know, hire an attorney. I mean, shameless plug, but you gotta hire an attorney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people
And,
know
and
when
there's-
they need an attorney.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and some of the things I've been doing really lately, something that's, I don't know how it's become so popular, is I've had a lot of people solicit me over Instagram for contract review, right? They're having with contracts with agents, contracts with producers, contracts with, musicians, and they'll ask for a contract review. Now, typically, those contract reviews end up, at an hourly rate. And for that hourly rate, you pay for the review, you pay for redlining, and you may even pay for some contract negotiation and drafting tips within there. Now, a full negotiation is different with a record label. But copyright is the easiest and most important way to go about doing it. I do copyright. You can also go on to the U.S. Copyright Office website to learn more about how to get a copyright done. But you also need to bear in mind that you will have to keep up and you will have to track infringements as well.
Okay. Wow, so much to it. Now, what are some of the major legal documents that people that you recommend for people entering into the entertainment industry? Because I mean, I think I hear all different things all the time. You mentioned copywriting, but then sometimes I hear it's important to protect your brand and make sure that you can't get sued for your assets and so on, whatever you may have owned before you started your entertainment pursuits. And even like with having so many people now becoming their own entrepreneurs because they can't work in their industry anymore. What do you suggest for them to start? Like, what can they come to you for as far as those goes?
Well, typically when there is a record label involved, the record label will have its own contract.
Okay.
Right. So if you have an interface with a record company, a record company will have its form of contract. Now, within that contract will be various provisions or clauses, right? And for example, I'll give you one that's critically important to have is a sunset clause, right? When you have a contract with a producer, right? Producers haven't created the music, they're managing the music, they're providing, a significant contribution to the music, and in the agreement with the producer typically gets their money off the top, right? Okay. And so you have to, if you created the work, if you've copyrighted the work and you own the masters, right? Masters being the key word, then you want to make sure that when you have a producer involved, that there's a sunset clause that talks about how to end the relationship. For example, some contracts with producers will have a relationship end and there'll be no end to the royalties. Producer will continue to get royalties. Well, if the producer is not the owner of the masters and you want that to end, you want to make sure you have that provision in the contract. You want to make sure you have, if you're working with other people, which a lot of people do, they start out working with other artists or other prospective artists. When you have people singing on the song, right? So if you've got a song, you're going to have a song set up where there's going to be the verse is going to be verse, and then you've got the chorus, and then you've got another verse, and you got the chorus, and then you got a bridge, and then you've got the final chorus. Now, within the spaces of there are going to be certain other people who are going to perform on that track or within your catalog that will provide certain like singing opportunities, right? Maybe a 10-second hook they might sing. Well, you get contracts in place, those people as well, those are called works for hire. Right. Okay. Which means that they're only going to come in to do this particular hook They don't get a portion of the royalties, but they get paid for the work. So you want to have agreement in place for your works for hire, because that's critically important, because you don't want anybody going to you to the performance rights organizations or the collection agencies. Collection agencies, not like collection for your
not the corner store ones.
You don't want them going to the collection agencies saying that they own a part of that song. And if you don't properly register the song, now this is the key part about a new artist when they're putting out creative works. You know, I talked a little bit about the ISRC number. They'll get an IPI number with BMI or ASCAP that will go along with all of the music that they produce, but they got to be very cognizant to register the music. You got to register your music. If you don't register the music, no one will ever know that the music is out there. And if they know it's out there and it's not, and they can see it's not registered, and they register it before you start to claim rights on it, then you got to fight. Then you got to hire a lawyer to fight about that. So
sounds it sounds very complicated. It's a good thing to just get an attorney to do it for you. Like Rhonda posted your email address. Just get him to do it for you. We're creatives. We don't like doing all this paperwork stuff you're mentioning.
Yeah.
We'd be attorneys too.
And one last thing I wanted to mention too is split sheets, right? Now, if you've got an artist performing on a track, like for example, some of the major artists will get a younger, new artist to perform on a track, and the record might hit gold, right? You hit a gold record when you have sold 500,000 records, right? The record might hit gold, but the other performer on the record is not a well-known performer. If that performer, the new performer, doesn't get a signed split sheet or a split sheet agreement, then they don't have any rights to the royalties. You know, sometimes artists assume that some of these things are automatic. They're not. It's your responsibility to keep up with it. If you're brand new into the industry, if you're trying to pave your way, it's really your responsibility to stay educated about those things, or get a lawyer who does that, who does all of those things for you, and pay them as a part of it. I think the best value thing to do would be if you hire a lawyer and pay them a percentage of what, you know, what comes out of all of the work, versus trying to pay them for an hour or 2 hours of work, you know, that which can range from anywhere from $250 to $700 an hour, depending on what state your lawyer is located in.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was curious what the budget for this is. Because I mean, artists, they're not known for being rich when they're indie. Like they're usually starving artists. So that's a great that you offer that percentage option as well.
So and remember that most of the things in the industry are negotiable. There are, you know, they use this term in the industry, say we have the standard 360 agreement. These things, there are some other types of agreements that they say standard, and not really standard, but they're standard for the organization presenting the agreement. It's the organization standard agreement. So you have to have an idea of what your standards are before you go into a negotiation with a record label, especially if you've already been putting out work, you've already been keeping track of your work, you've already started your own publishing company, you've already got distribution. If those are things you're already doing, and a label is really basically just going to take over that for you, you've got to have some idea of what your value is. And there are certain percentages, without giving the entire industry away, that they would kill me. I would be blackballed out of the industry if I did percentages.
Look, nobody wants to get in trouble with the attorney, especially me. Right. Nope. Understandable. So we've talked a lot about with the music side of things. How is it for like acting and film? And so, because I mean, they're out of work now as well. And I'm sure they're also like trying to find other ways to make money and different streams of income and so on. What kind of advice would you give for that even?
Well, with acting, it's a very different format, right?
Mm-hmm.
Acting is going to be based primarily on whether or not you're with a union type group. Okay, the union type group would be something like AFM, which is the American Federation of Musicians, and for actors, it'd be SAG-AFTRA, right? SAG used to be the Screen Actors Guild, right? And then in 2012, it merged with AFTRA, which is the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. And once they merged, you know, they have a way of going about doing union things. Now, if you're working on independent stuff, normally you'll get a one-pager. I know we have a lot of people in Atlanta who are getting acting deals to show up as extras in certain shows that they do around Atlanta. Those are typically a 1 or 2 page agreements that, you know, traditionally can't be altered very much, but it's important to understand what they are saying, what kind of rights you're giving away. Because in most cases, you're typically giving away the rights to promote it, the right to talk about it on Instagram. You may place it on Facebook that you've been in a movie or a film, and not having read the contract, be in violation and breach of the contract, that the film company owns those rights. Mm-hmm. So the most important thing is to know what's in the agreement.
I can't tell you how many times. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I can't tell you how many times I see people posting selfies on set, and I'm like, you're not supposed to do that. Right. My agent's always sending us messages, no selfies at work, because you could give away things from, like, maybe you're not paying attention to what's in your background, but TMZ, they'll zoom in and be like, oh, we see da 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 da, and they'll know things from it. So
that's right. That's right. Well, and so to your point, it's important to have a good agent that will do that. Now, when should you have an attorney get involved? At the stage in which you're trying to select an agent, because you're going to have to sign a contract with the agent. You're going to have to understand what the rules are for that agency, or those agencies will let you go. If the agency ends up letting you go and it's a well-known agency, then it could be tough to get work as an actor in the industry. So, you know, signing up with an agency, finding someone like Goldie Bell, amazing agency who really looks out their people, who knows the industry, who has the resources and connection. Those are the type of things you want to do first. And when you do that, you probably need a good lawyer to review those contracts, and then the agency will typically hold your hand all the way through the process. Now, if you're doing this independently and it's some one-time, you know, opportunity you might get, that agreement is going to be about 1 or 2 pages, and they're going to say you don't have any rights, pretty much.
Pretty much. Yeah, I was looking at joining a company, and they never, like, the contract never had anything about compensation. It was always verbally they would tell me the compensation. So my attorney was like, and null and void. Nice try, Camille. So you got to be very careful. I always get an attorney to look things over. And there was another instance, just to share so people are aware, where the contract was signed, money was sent, and the person was very well covered in the sense that they didn't actually have to deliver the goods as far as actually promoting that brand on their show or radio show, whatever, if they dissolved the company. So they could run off with the money, and the brand never got their advertisement from it. Wow. So, I mean, it can be hard on both sides. So it's definitely
I mean, they run through those. I mean, and see the difficulty with being one of those extra actors, you know, and going through an agreement, thinking that you're going to make changes in there, is that they'll get somebody else to sign it.
Pretty much.
And everybody pretty much knows that, but you should at least know what your rights are, know where you're willing to draw the line, you know, and give up those rights, and, you know, in perpetuity, right? You see that term, most people don't know what that term is. That's a lawyer term. Okay. In perpetuity, or you see a shall or a must or a may. Those are lawyerly terms that give indications that, you know, the average person will look at that contract and they won't have a clue that that means what it means.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a very predatory world out there if you're not careful, or if you don't have someone like yourself keeping keeping the being able to read through the BS, as they like to put in there. Now, because it keeps coming up, where like with thinking about streaming and being online, or even like with Issa Rae, like she started with the Awkward Black Girl. So many people are trying to find other ways to stay active. And I'm just curious how they could even, instead of the music side, but on the acting side, how they can protect themselves as well. Do they, because with I mean, I don't know exactly how they would go about copywriting a YouTube channel, or what they would need to do as far as being able to keep making content without worrying that everybody is just sharing it and they're not making anything off of it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, well, copyright is going to be used for certain specific things. I think, you know, you also have trademarks, right? The actor can create a certain trademark, and you know, once a trademark kicks in, once it's been used, right, at first use. And so it's not always going to be copyright that they actually need to be aware of, but trademark, there are certain ways they can go about providing new platforms, new sayings, new you know, people, new T-shirts. They come up with things like, one of the things I've seen going around is man, so strange. There's so many going around, but God is awesome. God is dope. That's what it's called. God is dope was one of the one I've seen going around, and an actor can take one of the lines from, you know, one of their scripts, and they can really try to, you know, use it in that way. YouTube is a lot like music, right? YouTube music is promoted through Vevo, and you know, copyrights associated with the holder of the IPI and ISRC are going to be tracked. Whereas if you're doing a YouTube, you know, there are certain rights you give up with YouTube as well. So you want to make sure, if you're going to use YouTube as a platform, that you know all of the rules associated with what you're trying to promote as an actor. But you definitely have the right to go out there and show what you got. And if you want to trademark a certain way, for example, this John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, they were able to trademark the way that they said and did certain things. And that made them very, very, very famous actors. And that was well before YouTube and Instagram and Facebook.
It makes me think of like why you can't sing "Happy Birthday" in a lot of movies or TV shows, because it's trademarked or copywritten to a point where it's not, like, nobody can afford to sing it.
That's right.
That's why even like TGI Fridays, all of them, they have the different songs because they couldn't use "Happy Birthday" anymore. Even
that's right.
So many things involved with it, but you have to, I mean, at the same time, artists need to be protected and be paid for their work, just like lawyers, doctors, everyone else. So I get it, but it's still one of those things like, oh, I did not realize that.
And it changes, and with digital, it's changing so much every day, every single day. And you got to make sure you've got, you know, the connection to the publishing administrators, or the people who can really, or the lawyers that can really keep up with, you know, what you do.
Now, speaking of relationships, you seem to have mastered having great relationships with a lot of different people, and maybe that's also what's helping with your career. What would you say that you were able to create those relationships? How did you get yourself into the rooms to be able to build these relationships, to get these kinds of clients that you have?
Let's see. I don't know. Sometimes it's humor.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a little
So
bit
you're saying you're funny? No, I'm kidding.
No, not right now. I don't think I'm being funny at this point, but
Well, we're getting into legal stuff, so I understand.
right.
Now let's get into your personality a little more. Yeah.
Law has a reputation, right?
Right.
Law has a reputation of being very still and very stale and very, haughty. And I guess my personality is a little bit different than that. I seek a connection with people. I try to understand the person first before I even start opening up and start talking about, what legal services they might need. And the better I understand the person, the better I can understand what their goals are. And it's really about matching the personality with the goal and how to best do that. And if we start off in a relationship that is built to foster that goal-seeking process, then it becomes less transactional. It becomes less, it becomes more of a relationship, right? Like I have a lot of friends who say, "Oh, you're just like a brother," or I can figure out you're just like a family member when I meet you.
Oh, be careful! They're gonna start wanting family rates. Just kidding. Bad joke. I think I'm funny too.
I know everybody wants the family rate. Everybody wants the family rate.
It's funny. My cousin and I, we were talking earlier about working with different businesses and how you want to work with certain businesses and then they just don't deliver. So that's why people end up asking for discounts, because you don't give us the full VIP treatment. So we're not going to want to pay full VIP prices. So if you're worth it, you should get it. Sure.
I'm sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
I think a lot of times lawyers, for that reason, and not making an excuse for all lawyers, but I think a lot of times lawyers stay away from that relationship building part because, typically when you feel comfortable with a person, you'll ask them, you'll say, well, I can't afford it. I'll need some assistance, and feel more comfortable asking someone they're closer in a relationship with than they do a total stranger. That personal connection, which can really make the representation successful, can really hurt the ability for a lawyer to make money. So it's kind of a balance that they have to seek out, if you can understand what I'm saying. They have to stay professional, and at the same time, they have to get personal. And there's a very thin line between the professional and the personal. But if you walk that thin line, and if you know how to walk that thin line, then everybody comes out happy.
I say that would be a dangerous line for them to want to cross on the same, because then it maybe the percentages start changing into your lawyer's favor, more and more of those freebies you try to get from them. Where it's like, you remember that time? Dock the pay. That's another percent on my side. And remember that other time we spent about a couple hours going over contracts? Yeah, we're deducting that from this as well.
Right.
So, but at the same time, it could be a matter of them telling a lot of friends that, hey, he really looks out for me. This is who you should call. Like I can see how that could be a balancing act on both sides for you. Oh, wow. So you also deal with athletes, and right now everything's kind of closed, or they're kind of start opening up. And I'm curious, just as a fan, what kind of protections do they have? Because I've heard things with insurance companies where they won't cover COVID related expenses if it's something that you've got due to work, like it's not part of their workman's comp because it's considered acts of God and so on. So what would make them want to get on the field or play basketball if they get at the risk of getting ill or putting their family at risk of getting ill and won't have that medical protection to take care of them? Or is there other things also they should probably be aware of? Because not just with athletes, but with actors and everybody, once things start opening back up, how can they? Because I just think of even with DL Hughley and his whole radio station getting sick and so on as well, because they weren't wearing masks, allegedly. See, I did learn some legalese. But what would your advice be for your clients or even people watching as far as protecting themselves?
Well, I mean, athletes are regular people outside of those contracts. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, to be quite honest with you, athletes don't get any special protections for having a professional contract, right? It's like it's an employment contract,
Right.
right? So it's the same contract you would have with some differences in it, with a little bit more intricacies that are to be worked out. But it's an employment contract. It's the same one you have with your employer, if you work at a corporate job.
I don't know.
So
My corporate job never has that I get physical therapy on the clock or gonna hang out in spas. Not saying they don't deserve it, but yeah, I don't have that on my contract.
Okay, well, let's use that one as a good example, right?
Okay.
When you think about the therapy and the spas,
Mm-hmm.
it's a part of the job
Mm-hmm.
because performance is critically important to an athlete. In order to perform, which is the basis of the bargain, the basis of the agreement between the party. One party is given performance, the other party is giving money for performance. The parties agree how performance is best obtained.
Mm-hmm.
And to best obtain performance, of course, they both saw outside sources to help determine what gives the best performance.
Right.
Those things are part of that performance. But really, it is a part of that employment contract. Typically, now, if you're going to go into a corporate job each day and sit at the desk, you're not going to be required to run, 40 yards in 4 seconds, right? To do
Oh,
that.
well, no, I'm kidding. No, no, I'm not.
Right. So it's a different component, but when it comes to the insurance that's associated with, athletes need like normal protection. They need insurance policies just like everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
They need trust like everyone else. Well, not everyone takes advantage of a trust, but they also need other products, is my point,
Mm-hmm.
that just like the normal person would need. They need investments, just like the normal person would need. So there's nothing really they can do other than get with their attorney or get with their financial advisor to find out what those products are that put them in the best position, right? Because there are clauses in the contract, their professional employment contract is what I call it. Most people say, oh, it's a sports contract. It's a professional employment contract.
Mm-hmm.
But the part of that contract, those there are clauses or provisions within that contract which give the employer an out when the employee is not able to perform the service. Now, the good thing is, let's use like the NFL, for example,
Mm-hmm.
right? They have a CBA, a collective bargaining agreement, which outlines some of the protections there that they will get as a part of being a member of the NFL Players Association and being a employee through the NFL, right?
Okay.
Those are protections that are pre-negotiated for 10 years at a time. So those bargaining agreements will outline many of the things that we're talking about and give them some sort of protections. Anything outside of that CBA, so long as it doesn't cause the player to violate the CBA, they're free to do.
Mm-hmm.
And they should get extra insurance. They should
Absolutely
have some sort of,
because unlike other jobs, you can have that 6 feet of space or social distancing, but that's kind of hard to do when you're getting tackled or going up
that's
for a
tough.
layup. So I'm curious what protections they have in that as well, because I know for film that there's a lot that they have to, because my father's a UPM and he was just telling me that a lot of insurance companies won't even cover films right now because it's just too dangerous if they have love scenes or different things. So I was curious what it was like on the sports side of things. Like, how are they going to
and it's still an evolving subject too,
Mm-hmm.
Camille.
Yeah.
It's still an evolving subject.
Yeah.
It's changing from day to day. So many protections they actually need, they haven't even thought to put those in place yet. We're still trying to figure out how to get on the field. because getting them on the field and performing is a part of compensation, being able to compensate them, right? The teams can't compensate the players unless they get them on the field to perform. That really is the critical part. And in the midst of that, I'm sure that they're aware, I'm positive that they're aware that somebody is going to contract the virus in the midst of that performance. How they handle it afterward will determine what new things that they need to go in place. Right. So unfortunately, to say certain people end up being guinea pigs. Not that we want a bunch of guinea pigs, but that's how it goes. The essential workers are going through the very same thing if you think about it. If you're an essential worker and you're working in a Publix or Walgreens or some store where people need to go and get food, people don't normally come in with masks, right? Not everyone's going to come in with a mask.
Yeah, there's a big thing now with Harris Teeter. I guess they're not requiring that people have to wear it. So different people are coming out saying that they refuse to shop there or go there and stuff because of it. And
so if you think about it, they have, they're in a unique position to where they're out here trying to provide a service that people need, but they need other people to be considerate about them as well, in addition to being able to add extra protections because they can't afford to buy extra insurance.
Right.
They
or
can't
even with the PPE, if it's so hard to get, then how do you even have it for all the different? Because like if essential workers can't get it now, then how does the NFL get it? How does the NBA get?
Right.
It's one of those things where if I can't find Lysol wipes, how do I know you? So,
right.
So it's like I don't know if I want to go there, but so wow, that's a lot. Because you can explain this because I was curious about this with athletes. They also have contracts with different, like Nike or Adidas, where they have to wear their products during the games. And since now they're not the endorsements, that's it. Sorry. Now that they don't have the ability to do that, are there, they're just Instagram models now? I mean, like what other options do they have as far as still getting
endorsements? They do.
I'm sorry.
You say they don't have the ability to do endorsements?
No, I mean they're not able to they're not playing right now. They're not on the field to show that they're wearing it. So like I guess I'm assuming Adidas and Nike and all of them are understanding, but at the same time it's still a business. So is there are they changing up the contracts and like, hey, just post 5 times a month and we're good or something? Like how does that even work, or is that still something?
Those contracts already work like that. Those contracts already pretty much have in place clauses that help them understand what the whatever the organization is going to need, and it's not always a commercial. It's sometimes to show up in public or do a few things, which that's even tough now to do. Show up in public, and so right now with everything being the way it has been, everybody's just been on pause, right? Nobody's making any major changes at this point. No one's, and unfortunately, that also means that no one's really giving out major endorsements right now as well. When you got, but the organizations are still working. Athletes are still getting signed to new agreements because they know there's going to be life after COVID. So you'll still see, for example, the other day you saw Cam Newton get some time with the New England Patriots.
Yeah, that was a shocker.
We've got a deadline coming up here in about 3 weeks for the tenders for some of these franchise guys to sign their franchise tenders. So work is still getting done. Although, things are slowing down, they haven't come to a halt.
Right. Have you heard any word about when things might open or any dates for things, maybe any exclusive information from seeing contracts?
No.
He's like, none that I can tell. Because look, we already canceled our NFL ticket. We're like, it's not coming back.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's gonna be back. I mean, well, I'll tell you something that's public knowledge, or should be public knowledge by now, is that they're going to eliminate 2 preseason games. You know, so that's something that's been taken away. And I think it's a, you know, and this is just my opinion. This is not a fact or anything. I think it's a good idea to eliminate some of the preseason games, keeps the players out of harm's way, puts them in position to be able to perform the rest of the contracts, and it's just leading. It's a good example to set. So that is just one thing I know that is in place. Everything else is still. It's fluid. It's a fluid situation.
I mean, we all have to adapt, right? So I was just curious how they were, because it, like I mentioned before, it's not like going to the office. There's a lot more close proximities with those sports, even with acting, with being on set, because it's such long days. And I'm sure even with athletes, they're practicing for long periods of time.
Right.
They're going on the road together, traveling together. I know there were some talks at one point about having it at Disney World or something of that nature, so their families could be with them or something. But I don't feel like I've heard anything about that.
Well, and that's, you know what, that stuff, like, you know, a lawyer probably is not going to be involved in. Right. I don't typically get involved with the logistics, that kind of stuff. That's the agent. The agent will do that work. The things I'm involved in, they have personal lives too. They're investments. They have things to keep track of, sometimes more than they can handle. And so it's my responsibility to make sure that they're not in trouble in court, or if they are in trouble, I'm not meaning criminal law, because I don't practice criminal law, but if they do have some sort of situation that comes up, it's my responsibility to keep them out of court. It's my responsibility to stand before the court on their behalf and kind of help them move through situations that other normal people would have to go take care of on their own. But yeah, the logistics and things like that, with they're on the field, and those are things that the agent would have a direct contact with the team about. You know, a lawyer not going to be, unless the agent is the lawyer, a lawyer's probably not going to be, you know, part of that.
Yeah, that's one way to double dip. It's being a lawyer and the agent. So we're almost out of time, but I wanted to touch on as well, because you're also a real estate attorney as well, and broker as well with that. And I'm sure a lot of people want to learn more about with that as well. So I'm sure with most of your clients, it's a matter of they're probably the owners buying real estate, as opposed to having to deal with maybe being out of work for a long period of time and worried about being evicted or not being able to pay their mortgages or different things. So what exactly would a real estate attorney, what's your main things that you're doing with that?
Well, real estate attorney it can run the gambit. Anything to do with property. More specifically, you know, they're a closing attorney, right? Closing attorney for residential and commercial transactions. And so what the closing attorney does is they consummate the conveyance of a property between the buyer and the seller. And so that's a lot of those pictures you see on my IG will be
champagne closings.
Closings, and I get, and although I don't post all of the closings on IG, I try to post the ones that have, you know, particular meaning to me. But that's one aspect of it. Then there is litigation, civil litigation, which is property disputes, whether property lines, encumbrances, liens, mechanical liens from work done on properties, whether or not certain bills were paid on properties, you know. So it can run the gamut from that aspect. I'm also a real estate broker owner. So I have 2 real estate offices, one in Atlanta, one in Miami. Atlanta Star Real Estate Brokerage is the Atlanta company, and Miami Star is the Miami company. And those 2 companies handle real estate transactions. And most of my agents, you know, they deal with athletes and entertainers as well. So I have the two brokerages that I manage. So I have to make sure that they are staying within the ethical and the legal guidelines of the law. And I'm constantly watching over each transaction to make sure that they follow those rules.
Sounds like you have your hands full. And I love all the multiple streams of income that you're going through. I just want to make sure if there's any questions you guys ask now, because we're almost done. I see one just came through from Goldie Bell, as a matter of fact. Is this a good time to try and refinance your home during the pandemic?
Absolutely. I'll give you a couple of reasons why. It's the perfect time because after, mortgages are, one of the key things about mortgages is they're paid in arrears, right? Which means you don't actually pay the moment you go into the mortgage. You pay the month after. Mm-hmm. So if you're in the midst of the pandemic and you're getting a refinance, you close in July, your payment may not be due until September. The other thing is rates are at a historical low. And I know we've been saying this year after year for the last 15 years, but they just keep going down. Okay. And so now is the best time. I mean, I've seen some rates as low as 2.9% come across my desk for closings. So yeah, that's another good reason. So to get the payment down, to skip a month of not having a payment, those are great things about a refinance right now.
Now, curious, what if you happen to do a refinance, let's say in May, and then in July you find out it's now down to 2.9, did you say? Can you be like, hey, can I refi again to get the 2.9?
Well, I'll tell you the rule is, here's the rule.
Okay.
And the rule is for every percentage point, it makes sense, right? So if you're a 0.5% better interest rate, it won't make sense because the payment, the money you spend in the fees to do the refinance won't be able to offset the new payment. So typically, a good refinance fee setup would be some that can be recouped in 12 to 18 months, right? So because let's say if you pay $5,000 on a refinance or $8,000 on a refinance, you want to be able to see the benefit in those mortgage payments over 12 to 18 months. So if your mortgage payment went from let's use round numbers, it went from $1,000 to $800. You got $200 a month that you would have as a better payment. Well, in order for the mortgage to have a benefit on it, you would have to have that $200 calculate all the way up to $5,000 before you were at zero to start determining when you receive the refinance benefit. Okay. So a lot of people don't think about the fees that they pay within the refinance that really sets the tone as to how quickly you are going to see the benefit. The benefit, the reason for the refinance is the benefit, right? Is the reduction in payment, but it's also the ability to eliminate those fees that you had to pay to get the benefit, right? Okay. If that makes sense.
No, it does. And I have several people asking about the artwork behind you. So it wasn't just me, because you guys didn't hear this off air, but the first thing I was like, oh, I love your painting behind you. So you have to give more details, because I've seen 2 comments come in about it. I'm trying to find the first one.
Yeah, you know what? This is
tell us about your artwork in the background. It's nice. And then they have questions about it. Yeah.
It's not a big this artwork is not a huge artist. I actually found this artwork in a design art place off of Jimmy Carter Boulevard here in Atlanta. And the reason I bought this artwork, I went to the University of Georgia, so I'm a Bulldog. And the artwork has red and black in it. And there are some hints of blue, which, I have a particular liking to wearing when I dress up. And it just kind of has this, the blurriness of life, trying to figure out how to get through life. So it's inspirational in a way that you know, each time I see it, it's a reminder.
That phone's going off.
Uh-oh. Yeah. Sorry about that, y'all.
That's okay. I'm like, uh-oh, Batmobile. It's Friday at 7. Sorry.
It's a reminder of the accomplishments that I've already achieved in my life, and the gray areas, because it's gray in the middle. It's that gray in the middle. The gray areas that I'm still working through, and then the blue is like, it's like a sky. Like it's like trying to reach the pinnacle. Yeah. So I'm sorry it's not a Van Gogh or anything like that, but
do you know how expensive it is to get a Van Gogh? Like, yeah, it's okay. We're trying to build wealth here, right? We're not trying to give it away. Especially new artists need shine, because I love my art too. Olivia Gatewood.
Beautiful. I love it.
Well, that's my mom. You made it. All right. Well, great. I know that in the comments they already posted how to get in touch with you, but I wanted to hear from you. What's your way that you like for people to get in touch with you? If you want to go ahead and share that real quick, and then you can have
you mean JJ Poole on Facebook. I am JJ Poole on Instagram. The JJ at askjjpoole.com is my email, and what else? Phone number 678-462-5455.
Man, you said that so fast. Hold on, I'll write it out for them. 678. I didn't even get the digits. No, I'm kidding. 678. Sorry, what?
678-462-5455.
Somebody else, please do it for me, because I'm like 678-462-5455. Okay. I'm dyslexic, so when you say a lot of numbers at once, it just goes. So hopefully I got it right. It's on there. And oh, Rhonda also says, "I'm so proud of you, JJ. You too, Camille." So great. Well, thank you so much again for being my guest. It was a lot of great information to help protect us artists out here in these streets. So I really appreciate that, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
You too. Happy Independence.
My people weren't free. No, I'm kidding. Happy Independence. Like, I already celebrated Juneteenth. I'm good. No, I'm kidding.
That's right.
I celebrate. I'm a bicentennial baby, so I celebrate them all. Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for being my guest, and I hope you have a great weekend, and a happy 4th to you as well.
Thank you, Camille.
All right. See you. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you got some great information on how to protect yourself here legally and so on, as well as real estate. And I guess we'll have to keep seeing what's going to happen as far as with all the different sports teams and so on, and how they're going to be back on the road or not. We shall see. Well, speaking of on the road, next week I will be off. So I may do some watch parties next week, but there will be no guests. There will be no shows, no new shows next week. It's a good time to see some of my old shows, or tell a friend, tell a family, tell someone about the eSpot. And I'll be back July 11th, 13th. I forget the day of the week now that I said that. July 13th. That's right. Because I will have my lucky charm, Mr. Marcellus Reynolds, as my guest on July 13th. I'm so excited to have him back. We're going to hear about all the different shows that he's casting for. So maybe you could be on a game show. How exciting. And we can also talk a little bit more about his beautiful book that I am obsessed with. And he's been interviewing all these other different authors about their book as well, that's about modeling, and they're just amazing books. And of course, I ended up spending a lot of money on those as well. So I'm very excited to have him back, and so many more great treats coming for you in the rest of the month of July. And I hope you enjoyed Black Music Month this past June, where I brought in all different kinds of musicians and singers and performers in the music business. And today, JJ Poole sharing all of his knowledge as far as protecting yourself in the music industry. So thanks again for tuning in. Make sure you share, make sure you follow me, because I'll still be on Instagram because I'm addicted. So follow me at The Real Camille Cower on Instagram, or keep following me here on Facebook. Twitter, I'm on CK on Air 1. So you can check me out there as well. Or you can check me out on my website. I do have a website. It's CamilleCower.com. Super easy. Cower rhymes with flower or shower or tower. me stop. All right. Well, thanks again for being my guest. And I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend celebrating the 4th. Be safe, be careful, wear your mask, and I will see you on July the 13th. Have a good one.